Delighted to have Simon on the first podcast recording. Simon was my first mentor. I graduated from university, set up my first business, Tech, didn't really know what I was doing, joined an accelerator, and he was one of the founders and mentors on that accelerator. We became good friends. We're still good friends today, one of my best friends. And he's since taken what he was doing in the accelerator, but into the online world and basically helping startups globally to build their first MVP, to get investment. He invests in startups as well. And what's interesting about this is he was really early in no code. So basically using no code tools to really shrink how much effort it takes to build an MVP and try and test your software idea. He also invested in those ideas. And then was also one of the first people to kind of transition over from that to vibe coding tools like Replit, Bolt, Lovable, Vercel, the tools where you can type a prompt in and it builds the app for you with AI. Now, most people use those vibe coding tools for basic prototypes to show somebody else, this is what I'm thinking of building. But very few people that I've met, in fact, almost none, use it for production-ready apps. And Simon is doing exactly that. He's doing that with multiple different teams, multiple different companies, startups, and has, I think, a really interesting perspective on how one can use these tools to build real apps, not just prototypes. So I hope it's useful for people watching. Thanks. Simon, welcome. We'd love to hear more about how you're using vibe coding in Million Labs.
Yeah, sure. So Million Labs is really a venture builder. We've helped about 2,000 startups and small, medium enterprises build something. We take them from idea stage through to kind of launch and growth. And our specialty is really around minimum viable products, or that MVP build. And so kind of when we started, we were like, well, how do we do this quicker? Like, it's really expensive, or it was really expensive to do this in code. You needed, a computer science founder. Typically that was, every startup founder was looking for a co-founder that was a tech co-founder. And we kind of saw at the time that this thing called no code was appearing and it was becoming viable. Like, it's been around for a long time. We've had no code for 30, probably 40 years with things like Visual Basics and stuff. But then new platforms were arriving, like Bubble, like Webflow, etc., that were actually viable. You could actually build something and you could not just prototype it, but actually put it into the market. So we jumped on that bandwagon back in 2018 and probably grew to certainly the biggest agency in Europe building in that, and one of the biggest in the world, helping, as I said, like 2,000 plus startups build something using that no code piece. And then I guess more recently, that no code is blended into what we're now calling vibe programming. So that's using much more AI to build it. It's all still code, like whether you're no coding visual programming, it's kind of a PowerPoint and Excel combination thing that you're doing configuration, but ultimately it's generating code in the background. The same with vibe programming, you might now be prompting, but it's still generating code in the background. So really it's, just changing the input, but the output's still code. So yeah, we've moved into that. And over the last 6 months, we've been building stuff for startups and SMEs in Vibe.
So you're basically taking these like processes of you're taking the software development process that might have taken 6 months or 12 months and cost you hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars, and crashing it into this process, which takes how long and costs how much?
Yeah. So I don't know, the average app I think is like $75,000, something like that, to get to market in code in the traditional fashion. And we're probably doing the same thing for like $7,500 to $10,000. So it's a kind of 10x value cheaper and probably a 10x quicker. So, something like 6 to 12 weeks, somewhere in that gap is where we're kind of aiming to get something in and out the door. And that includes scoping it, like figuring out what you actually want to build and what's the right things for the minimum viable product version 1, designing it, and then obviously coding it and then launching it. So all of that done in that kind of condensed space. And what it's meant is, like, hear these things like agile and waterfall, these are all kind of software development techniques. We've had to kind of reinvent that and come up with our own version of that, because agile isn't agile enough when you're doing things at that kind of speed. So that's been an interesting journey to figure out, well, what do we need from that and what don't we need from that? And it's almost the thought, pace of thought that's going on, particularly with founders who are probably think they know what they want, but are, constantly changing because the data's coming into them from various research and things that they're doing, and it's not a straight path for them, it's weaving. But actually the fact that we can do it so quickly means that you don't get too much weaving, but just enough to make the product kind of like hit the mark when it comes out.
So like we were in this position where you could drag and drop essentially in a kind of visual way how you wanted the app to work. People did do this themselves, but it wasn't like, there was still quite a lot of work actually involved in understanding how you put there was still some programming required if you really wanted to build an app that worked well. I tried to do this myself in Bubble probably 2 years ago. But now with vibe coding, it's literally just like a prompt, like a ChatGPT style interface. You just type in what app you want, and it just like runs away and magically builds it for you in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Exactly. So there was a learning curve for the tools. I think that was the challenge, like Bubble or Webflow or whatever. And it's the same in any tool, whether you're using Excel or PowerPoint, you get people that can do the basics, and then people like pros that can do all of the pivot tables and formulas and all the rest of it. Well, in order to get something really usable out of it, you needed to be in that pro end of some of these tools. So, you or I could pick up Bubble or whatever and do some basics really quickly and get some result out of it. But to really get it to production so that you could launch it and have build a business off the back of it, no, you needed some skill sets. So that's kind of where an organization like us came in. I think Vibe has moved that on again. So again, you can get pretty far just on a prompt. If we look at some of the tools, Lovable, Replit, Bolt, all these kind of Vibe programming tools, as you said, the input is a ChatGPT type window. You type in, like, I want to build an Airbnb clone and I want it to do X, Y, Z, etc. Click the button. And then sometime later, depends on how complicated the app is, but anything from, as you said, 5 minutes to, I think we built one the other day. I think it took 16 hours to do the initial prompt build. So it can be a while, but ultimately it's kind of just doing it on its own, and you can go and make a cup of tea, or you can go and have a day off or whatever, and then come back. So, but I think, and here's the but, it still isn't today generating an app that's usable. You're probably getting, reckon, around 60 to 70% there, like after your initial prompt. And then you've got a hard battle to get to the 100%, which is true of most apps, like whether you're doing it in code or not code. But that can be a really hard battle, and it can take as long as the no code did, or as maybe not as long as coding, but it takes a chunk of time to fix that and some skill.
And I think I've heard that again and again. I've definitely experienced that myself too. So, as you say, the first version is quite easy, but then you come to something like, the login wall's not working, which seems really simple as if from a user experience, but you end up spending literally 10 times as long as it took you to get to the prototype, and then you don't succeed, and then you basically don't end up continuing. But what I thought was so interesting about what you've been doing is you've actually not just taken it to build prototypes, but also prototypes that work, but all taking it beyond that to production apps where you've got real users using it for real business stuff, which is, I hear again and again from other founders and product builders that it's great to prototype. I build a first version. I build something that I can show the developers what I want. And it's amazing for that, because before I had to have a designer and, I could try and do some kind of, prototype myself, but I'd usually fail, or actually I didn't quite know what I wanted, and by building the first version I learned what I actually wanted, and then I was able to kind of iterate a few times. But then still there's that handover period where I'm now going to give it to a software developer. Here's the prototype I built, can you now build it for real? You're taking that prototype and making it the real thing. What is the secret sauce?
Yeah, the secret sauce. And I totally agree with you. I mean, we use it for prototypes as well. So we're using it almost in the sales function. So someone will say, I want an app that does this, etc. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of an example. We had one, they have like what they call sober houses in the US, where if you've got a drink problem, alcohol problem, you can go into a house and they run programs and so forth. And they wanted to do like an Airbnb style, so you could find the program and the house that fits your, fits your requirements. So I was able to take that conversation and then just prototype it, literally build them within, 10 minutes of a prompt, build something that looks like it might work. And I think that's the key thing, is it visually, it looks like Airbnb. There's a picture of a house. You can click on the house. You can see the house details. You've got rating system, all the rest of it. It looks like it works. But the reality is behind the hood, there's no database, there's no storage of data, there's no real action happening there. And that's where I think most people get today with vibe programming, is they get to that point where they've got something. What we've done is taken our skill set in the no code and applied it to the vibe. And that's having some technical knowledge. I know we're not coders. We don't look at the code. We still don't look at the code. But we have some technical knowledge to be able to give it the right prompt for it to get it to the next stage. So we can look at databases. We can look at other structures and see, right, okay, well, it's not saving that into the database. So tell it you need to save that data into the database. So I think it's just a skill set that could be taught. But again, it's that, how much time does a founder or SME, person want to spend to get over that hurdle, rather than, take it to an organization like us to get it built and get it finished off. So we're inheriting, just lots and lots of half-built apps at the moment, which is fine, which is good.
And you're kind of saying that those half-built apps is something that you can build on the fly almost just as part of the sales conversation, which kind of proves that the real work is in the bit that comes after, right? And I think that's because that initial bit, anybody could type in the prompt and it looks so real that people probably think, actually, isn't this the whole thing? Like, what am I paying for to get it? Why is there work involved to get this further? But there is. Are you able to show us like how you're actually doing this? Because in Replit, you've got Agent 3, the new thing they launched, which is more autonomous and spins up other agents that like user test the experience for you. I love the visual of it is amazing to watch, because you say you want something built and then it kind of, the next agent comes along and you can see it browsing the prototype and going, oh, I found an error here. I'll go back and fix it. The reality is it works. It's amazing. It's incredible what they've built, but it's also sometimes gets stuck and can't get unstuck. And even with some software building knowledge, product building knowledge, you still can't get it unstuck. What are you doing that's making it work to a better to a production ready app?
Right. So hopefully you can see this. So we've built a CRM. So it's Pipedrive, HubSpot, whatever you want to call it, but it's our version of it. And we now have about, 70 or 80 customers using this. It's free for people to use. We built it in-house for ourselves and then thought, well, we'll share it out because it's an interesting experiment in terms of understanding what it's like to have a Vibe program that's live and has lots of users on it, etc. Because that's a different dynamic than using it internally. But it does all the things that you'd expect it to do. So deal management or lead management with pipelines, and you can move stuff along pipelines. You can drag and drop, etc. You've got task management, contact management. All of those things are kind of built into there, and a lot more. It syncs with email. It syncs with Calendly. It syncs with Zoom. So it does a lot of sort of, I guess, what we call third-party connections out to other things. But let me now show you the back end of that. So let me show you what it looks like. This was built in Replit. And as you said, Replit has gone through multiple iterations. So Replit is what they call an IDE, but basically it's an all-in-one programming console or platform. So I can do literally everything in here. So I can look at the database. So we've got a development database here. I can click into that and I can see all the tables in the database. I can click into a table and I can see all the data in the database. This is very no-code-esque. This is the same way as no-code. It was all in kind of a single platform. On the left-hand side here is my agent. So this has been doing tasks for me, and literally I'm prompting it. So I can just say to it, let's think of a feature. I want to add MailChimp integration to this app. Can you plan this feature? And I'm just going to change it into planning mode because at the moment it's in building mode. So just change that to plan.
You don't want it to ruin your production app.
I don't want it to ruin it. It won't be the production, but yeah. But just let that go away and it will go off and do things. So that's fine. The Agent 3 is fairly autonomous, and I can tell it how autonomous I want it to be because I can set the autonomy level here, low, medium, high, and max. If you put it on max, it will try to do everything itself without coming back to you and saying, should I do this or should I not do this? At the moment, we've got it on medium. And I can also turn on app testing mode. So it would actually log on to the app and you can see it in real time doing things. So it's clicking on buttons and trying to test stuff. Now, that sounds brilliant, but in reality, we're not quite there yet. And I think this is the challenge. The hype is ahead of the reality of it. And the other challenge we've got is around cost. So each one of these things that I've done here, I should be able to click back into it. So this was 34 seconds of work, this previous prompt I put in. And you can see that cost me 0.14 cents. But other actions that maybe have taken longer, could have cost me $2, $3, $4, $5. Well, that really adds up really quickly. So the other thing that we're doing, I think that's different, is that we have Claude running in a shell. So we can bring in Claude, so not using the AI agent in Replit, but now using Claude, and using, actually this is using the very latest, was only released yesterday, Sonnet 4.5. We're using Claude as well to make updates because Claude's much cheaper. And it's exactly the same code base. Both agents, the one on the left and the one on the right here, are both working on the same code base, but we can use one to check the other's work. We can also take advantage, I guess, of the different agents and the technology that they're using. You can see that's gone off and planned this whole feature, or is doing that.
You can probably run this Claude and Replit at the same time and speed up your work, or are there other ways of can you how many instances of Claude are you kind of running at once to try and get it to do the thing you want?
I'm running one. And the only reason I'm hesitating is because I think the challenge with running multiple agents is you run the risk of them trying to update the same files at the same time and basically screwing each other up. So I think while that might be possible, it would only be possible if you had a foreman agent monitoring across all of the agents to make sure they're doing the right thing, which is what the Replit 3.0 agent has. You can see it having multiple agents. You can see a conversation going on between agents. And they have what they call the architect. So the architect's like this senior programmer, developer that's telling the other agents what to do. Whereas if you're doing it across, Claude and the Replit and maybe, even Cursor, then you're not going to have that overarching agent. And I think you're going to run into problems.
So you're using, when are you using the agent in Replit, Agent 3, and when are you using Claude to fix stuff? What's the difference?
I'm using Claude most of the time, and I'm using the agent when I want to make database architecture changes or app storage changes, because it understands the Replit environment better because it's Replit's tool. So where I have to make, architecture changes, I'm doing it in the Replit. Where I'm just making pure code changes, I'm doing it in Claude. And most of the stuff I'm doing is just code changes. So that's being done in Claude. And also we're doing it like that because of cost reasons. Because, we can easily, building an MVP, we could easily rack up $1,000 worth of AI costs in building it. So that gives us interesting pricing challenges.
Yeah, if you're aiming for 10% cost of the old days of $75,000 to build an MVP, then $1,000 actually eats quite significantly into that margin. If you, I guess, also want to be able to fund some humans who know how this stuff works really, really well to spend their time optimizing the app. And what's your split on what's your split on people? Like in terms of designers, software engineers, product managers, what's the ideal kind of person that you go and hire to help build these MVPs or build these apps, I should say, not MVPs?
Yeah, I mean, that's changing massively. And I think this is probably one of the challenges in the industry as a whole is we would always have a designer that was a standard traditional designer, did stuff in Figma. We'd take the Figma, we'd then pull that into the no code or the Vibe or whatever, etc. So we would have a designer on the team, we would have a developer on the team, we might even have an AI expert if we're doing AIs, very detailed AI stuff. We'd have a startup advisor, we'd have a project lead that's just making sure everything happens on time, etc. We'd have a scoping person. So we would have up to 6 people per project working with that client. Now we can probably we don't need this. The scoper is now the senior developer. So those have become one because we have an AI tool that takes the scoping meeting and converts that into a scoping document that we then agree with the customer, and then we start to build on. So that's all AI driven now. So we've gone from probably it taking us something like 8 to 12 hours to taking like an hour's worth of call plus, I don't know, 20 minutes of making sure that the output is correct. With the design as well, AI can do most of the design work itself. The CRM hasn't had a single designer involved in it. Now you might say, well, that shows. But, for lots of apps where designs, yes, is important, but is not integral. So lots of SaaS apps that are being used internally for organizations, etc., they don't need the cutting edge design. They need functional design. And AI is really good at functional design. It knows what the latest, drop down looks like and the latest components are. So that's fine. So AI can do a lot of that. So we've gone from sort of 8 designers down to a couple of designers now. And those designers are used where a customer's really looking for some really unique design. And particularly they tend to be consumer apps. Yeah. And so that role, I wouldn't say it's going away, but there's a lot less people required to do that. And then I think in theory, we should need less developers, but we're not there yet because it's still that last 40% is so intensive that actually the cost hasn't dropped. If anything, it might be even creeping up using AI because we've got a human resource and now we've got the AI cost on top of that. So it might have gone up a little bit, but the complexity of what we can build has also gone up, so now we talk about an MVP. Some of the features we'd have gone, no way for MVP, no way. We can go, yeah, sure. We'll whack that in because it's, the AI's got to figure it out, and it can. So I think that's the change.
It makes total sense. So like you were like, people say you can't build serious production apps in vibe coding. It's just for prototypes to show someone else what could be. But you're saying that's absolutely not true as long as you have the right stack.
Yeah, I'd say it's bollocks. I mean, we've proved it. We have multiple apps now that are live and have, tens of customers, soon to be thousands of customers. So yeah, it's bollocks. I guess the impression comes because people try it as you have and get to 60%, but can't get beyond that. So they're like, oh, it's great for a prototype where you can just click around and it looks like a clickable wireframe. Sure. But if you have a little bit of skill, you can now get to 100% and you can launch an app. So I think that's the difference. It's totally viable.
So you can now build complex experiences, SaaS apps, in a matter of minutes or days. What does that do to the SaaS world?
No, I think this is the thing. Like, I've been, and you and I have been having debates about like, what does this mean? What's the so what of this? And like, I'm now convinced that if let's say you've bought a CRM, you're paying $45-50 per person. There's 5 or 6 of you got access to the CRM. You're paying $300-350 a month for the CRM, 4 or 5 grand a year. Like, we could rebuild that CRM for the same amount as your annual cost. And thereafter, you're just paying a hosting fee of, let's say, $50 a month, not $500 a month. It suddenly becomes cheaper. So as apps become easier to create, you got to wonder why you'd be paying for a SaaS app that kind of does, I don't know, let's say you use 60% of the features and 40% you never use because it's not for your business. You've had to make your business match the SaaS app. So your workflows and your processes have all had to match the SaaS app, not the other way around. And now you're in a position where, well, I could build this myself or use an agency for my annual cost, and I could make it exactly fit my business. I think that's a really interesting, statement about what's possible today. And as a business owner, like certainly we've started rebuilding all of our apps that we're paying for because it's cheaper and cost effective. And we build it exactly to our process, which I think is like what every business dreams of, isn't it? Like you want it to fit the way you do things, not have to fit the way they're doing things. And you're like, that's crazy. And you're constantly fudging it. Like as a business owner, you're like, I wonder if we label that value there, something else. We could use that value to do this for us. You're constantly doing that. Or you end up in a spreadsheet.
And the reality is that, your example of $300, $400, $500 a month is actually on the low side of what lots of larger businesses are paying. They're paying many tens of thousands of dollars a month or a year, certainly, for some of these tools. And if you can rebuild it for essentially a month's cost of doing it, and it works exactly like the company wants it, and maybe they care about it being owned by them too. Some will, some won't. That becomes super compelling. But then, does that mean that those SaaS companies that own and operate all these large scaled businesses start to crash, or what does that do to a lot of that cost of these SaaS tools is actually in selling and marketing them too, right? So you've got, is it the death of SaaS tools that are sold by large sales teams and cost that much money, and are these big contract values? What happens there?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, if you're a large enterprise and you're spending tens of thousands on Salesforce or NetSuite or something like this, and you think, well, with 1 year's worth of capital, I could build this myself, and it could be exactly as we want it as a business, and we control the roadmap moving forward. I'm not waiting for Salesforce, NetSuite, or whatever to release the latest and greatest. I can have it tomorrow if I want it, because I just reprompt it, or I get the tech team to reprompt it and add those features. Like the speed, and in the AI world, speed is becoming a real thing. Like we were, I don't know, I was complaining the other day, it's like, I'm struggling to keep up with the bloody changes in AI, never mind our customers or customers or competition. So if you're going to keep up, you need to have a tool that's going to keep up with you as well. It needs to be able to change and adapt on you. So I think that's going to become increasingly more important. And so if you don't own it, like, how do you do that? So yeah, like, SaaS is dead. Like, I think it just is.
Pretty bold statement. So what are we building SaaS tools for which customers are we building SaaS tools? What kind of SaaS tools are going to be successful in this new world where anybody can build any SaaS tool? Why are you selling a SaaS tool? Is it things that are like marketplaces, or like what SaaS tool are you going to continue paying for?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting question. So I think two things happen. The price crashes, because if I can rebuild it for $5,000, then I will. But if it only costs me $5 a month or something, then it's probably not worth it. So, the value price changes. So that brings down. So all these multiples, these SaaS companies are getting kind of disappear, because you can't get that kind of revenue out of customers anymore. So I think that's the first thing that happens with the SaaS. And then the second one, I think it goes super niche. So like you build a CRM for, I don't know, solar panel installation companies. You build, one for cleaning companies. So you end up with very niche products that sit in there, and they're low price. So you go, well, I'm a, solar panel company. I want the solar panel CRM, because everyone thinks their business is unique. And to a certain extent it is. And so therefore I go and buy that that SaaS platform. But the generic SaaS, I think, goes away.
I mean, there's a really exciting part to that. There's if that future is true, that there's a worrying future for many, many people building SaaS tools who have raised lots of money and probably continue to need to raise more money, and that money might start to run out if others agree with that viewpoint that they're not going to be able to make it work, right? And then what happens is those SaaS tools disappear because they can't afford to keep running them in the same way that they were. And then the tools that we're used to using start to disappear too, even if we're not the founders ourselves of those SaaS tools. But I guess that's how quickly will that happen? Do you think that happens in like 2-3 years, or does that happen over 5-10 years, or is it faster and it happens this year, but by the end of this year?
I mean, my guess is the speed of change. I mean, business, depending on the size of the businesses, they're very slow to adopt and change stuff. So, that's in the favor of SaaS at the moment. Like, people's ability to do nothing is pretty high, and no change, status quo. But I would suspect, like, a lot of change starts to eat away at their core business over the next 2 to 3 years, for sure. And then maybe 10 years, it's completely gone, or it's completely degraded. I mean, if you're a large CRM provider and you've got some really big customers, you don't need to lose too many of those for it to really start to have an impact. So yeah, I think we could see some of them disappearing. Probably not overnight, but definitely in the next few years.
Yeah, especially I guess when you also got the frontier model creators like OpenAI also kind of starting to cannibalize some of the people building apps. So they're also starting to say that I think OpenAI talked about building new docs experience potentially, was it? Or there's a few of the different frontier models have said that they're building these experiences for some of the core experiences inside their experience as well. So you kind of got attacks from multiple sides. I guess also really quite a positive outlook for some smaller businesses though. Like if your dry cleaners down the road is able to build an app that's perfect for them to sort out your dry cleaning, then they can be way more productive too. And then suddenly software that was essentially only available to higher margin businesses, or who businesses that kind of fit into a certain type, a certain market size that's big enough to build for. Suddenly, in a year or maybe even now, some of those much smaller niche businesses can benefit from the advantage of software, and that will, I guess, increase the productivity of that whole kind of like niche sector. How big is that for the economy? How big is that for the world? Is like that's a really interesting kind of consideration that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of economies are betting on that as AI being a productivity boost because they can't figure out how else to do it. So it's got to be AI or nothing. Yeah, and I totally agree. Like, I mean, you could argue that the dry cleaner that doesn't innovate in that way is dead because somebody will come along and do that and they'll take some of the cost out of the model and therefore they'll be competitive. They can drop the price or be competitive in lots of ways or just more profitable. So yeah, I see that happening probably a lot where the smart SMEs will start to look at their business and go, what can we automate? What can we build in-house? What can we get rid of to reduce, our overheads? I think I was looking at the other day, we spend upwards of $1,000 a month on just little bits of SaaS software, and it all adds up. You're like, oh, that's only $50 a month. But actually, when you add it all up, there's quite a lot of cost that goes into running that business. So getting rid of some of that, I was even sat there the other day thinking, should we rebuild Slack? We use Slack for communications across the teams, etc. But I'm just wondering, should we just rebuild that? And that becomes an option. I don't know what we spend $1,000 a year on it, something like that. I don't know what it is, but we could.
I love that you're considering
that pretty.
That's not something that I would even think about replacing. It sounds super complicated to build, but I love the confidence that you have in Replit and Claude and the stack you have that actually you could go along and rebuild Slack. That's amazing, and consider that for a cost saving of $1,000. I love that. What's the yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's not just the cost saving. I think more importantly, it's the ability to integrate it and bring it into a single environment, because with all these SaaS platforms, you've got to log in for every single one. You get a new member join. You've got to get them set up on all of the different SaaS platforms. It's a pain in the neck. So whereas if you can bring it all into a single app, your ERP or your system, whatever you want to call it, we call our Skunkworks. But if we can bring it into our central system that we're using, then it just saves all that faffing around and that extra admin overhead that is kind of just costed into the cost of the business every year to deal with it.
But what about solutions like NAN or Zapier that allow you to connect your SaaS tool to your CRM tool, and they kind of solve a little bit of that kind of the connectivity, the glue between the different tools. Are you saying those might not be needed either?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you follow that trajectory, the obvious thing is the reason they exist is because we've got all these SaaS tools and we've got data in one and we want to get the same data into another or partial bits of data into there. So we're like having to use these tools to glue the things together. Particularly if this SaaS tool doesn't have an API integration with this SaaS tool, then the only way to get that data is to Zapier it out or N8N it or whatever. So they exist to solve a problem that shouldn't exist. That problem shouldn't be there in the first place, and it is. Whereas if you think about the new world and we go to our own SaaS platforms, well, we'll just make it all talk, or it's all in a single app, or we'll just make our apps talk to each other and send the data that we need across. And so those products, sure, they'll exist for a while we're still in this kind of unbundled SaaS products. But if we get to a bundled SaaS product, then we don't need it.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I think it's also any thoughts on the browser control world as well, because you've got these like frontier models that are starting to integrate more deeply with some of the browser, being able to control a browser essentially and be able to use any tool. That kind of like is another set of like integrations that didn't exist before. If you're then building your apps connected to those frontier models that can then use any of the other apps as well, it's kind of like multiple forces at play. You've got on one hand everything's becoming more integrated, on the other hand you can also just build everything on the same stack. It's kind of like hard to compute because there's so many things that are changing all at the same time.
It's like it's mind blowing, and I think you make a really good point. But the reason that they're doing that in a browser so that you can connect to multiple systems is basically it's a new version of Zapier, isn't it? Like it's an agent that will go off and do those things for you. But it exists because of the problem that we've got so many of these different tools out there. So if you don't have all these tools, then you don't need that functionality, not in the same way. So yeah, you're right. There's a race on to see what gets there first. I mean, if the browser gets established and this solves that problem, maybe you just keep the SaaS tools because you can, have it log onto the CRM, extract data, push it into your MailChimp or whatever, and therefore you don't care. But I suspect cost still becomes the issue because now I'm paying for SaaS tool there, and now an AI agent to talk between the two. So. Like, do I really need that cost if I could bring it all into one place? I'm not convinced, but I don't know. Who knows where it'll end up?
Okay, let's jump into some quick fire questions. One that jumps into my mind regularly is, or kind of comes, one that I ask myself regularly is, are you working less or more than you were before AI?
Am I working more as a result of AI or less of AI?
Yeah. I mean, I can just share my personal experience. I actually think I'm working more because it's so suddenly so possible to do so many things. I think I'm more productive, but I'm not working less. I'm spending more time in front of a computer, like trying to like use all these really exciting tools. Is there a moment, I guess I'm hoping, where the tools start to do more stuff for me and I sit back and I'm, isn't that the promise of AI, that we get to work less? It doesn't feel like that the way to me. I'm working more.
More autonomy, of the AI tools. I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I'm working more. I like work long hours anyway, so I'm working the same number of hours. I think I'm more productive in those hours. I'm getting more done as a result of using AI tools. But I agree with you. I share the kind of same. Wouldn't it be nice if it just dealt with all of this stuff? Yeah, and I think it's still fairly disjointed. Like, you can jump onto ChatGPT, ask it for, I don't know, give me the text for this, and you cut and paste that into another system and you get going pretty quickly. But I don't, it's not working across my multiple systems. It's not going, oh, you did that over there, then I should go and update the marketing over here for you. It's not there yet, but hopefully that's the dream, I guess.
That is the dream. What are you recommending to your daughter about what she should do in her future?
She's 12 now, so kind of AI is obviously creeping into her world. She's using it for homework, and I see it like the new calculator. Like it's being used in very basic stuff. I suspect we're going to see changes in education, although education is pretty slow to adopt these things. And certainly there seems to be more pressure around not using AI than using AI in the classroom. It's like, well, did you do this homework via AI, and can we test to check, see whether it's been created from AI? There's a lot of that going on. But I mean, my suggestion to my daughter and discussions with wife is around what's going to be critical in the world of AI. I think it's going to be communication skills, like the ability to tell a story, pitch something, etc. The ability to, ride with the punches, that grit, that determination. That's not going to change. That's what we look for in entrepreneurs. I don't think that's going to change even with the AI world. So if I can give her those skills, even if education can't, if we can give her those skills, I think she'll be fine, whatever the outcome of AI is. Because I just don't know, and I think I'm in the thick of it, and I still don't know. I mean, what do you think? What are you going to do?
Mine are a little bit further off. My daughter's 3 and my son is 3 months old. But yeah, it's a similar, in 15, 20 years or something, what's the world going to look like? It's kind of, I agree with you, grit, adaptability, creativity, communication, all those kind of basics. Certainly, I think it's worth having skills like maths and English as well, because I think they kind of help you be a rounded individual that is and kind of pick up other skills too. They're kind of like some of the basic building blocks, essentially, of being able to do, being productive, and being able to be helpful in the world. The precise, I'm not even trying to predict the precise kind of jobs that will exist. I think it's 50. The rate of change is so fast. We're looking at like, I can't predict 5 years. I think, yeah, and I also feel like I'm in a bit of a bubble sometimes because, like, I talk to people online for work every day, and I'm like, wow, AI is really changing everything. And then I walk out of the house onto a high street and think no one seems to have changed at all. But I do think that's all going to catch up. And I do think there's this like wave that people aren't seeing and is suddenly going to hit as some people who are basically using AI start to outcompete the businesses that all these people work in, and then they'll feel it, and then they'll have to go and adopt AI too, and then it will start to change all the businesses that so many people rely on. So I do think we haven't seen the impact yet. When you're not outside of the bubble that we live in, I think we will see it. I think we'll see it in not too far away, probably 2 to 3 years, or maybe faster. We'll see it. I don't think it'll be much longer than that. I do think that, yeah, for my daughter, communication, creativity, and the basic skills is what I'm focused on right now. And I guess also I have a bit more time to kind of just get them up and running on the basics of maths and English, reading and writing, before I have to worry too much about what. And I also listen to lots of podcasts of people talking about what the future might hold, because like I'm trying to learn. Like I don't think anybody knows. Like literally nobody knows. I listen to podcasts of like the leaders of these frontier labs, AI labs, and they don't know. Nobody knows. Everyone's like, I don't know. Like it's going to be different.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you just think about self-driving, I think we were told, I don't know, 10 years ago we won't be driving cars today, and here we are. We're still driving cars, very much driving cars. So you just don't know. Some things sort of hit that limit, don't they? And then we don't get to a generative AI. We just get to this kind of position we're in now. Maybe it doesn't move forward, but it certainly feels at the moment like literally every 2-3 months we're seeing a jump in the capability of stuff. Yeah, and I think that already is having a knock-on effect in particular areas, like developers less needed, designers less needed. So some of the technical roles, the knowledge roles. And I think here's an interesting thing. If you look at the previous revolutions, they were all about replacing muscle. So, they were taking people out of the field and into the factory. Now they're taking people out of the factory and replacing them with automation and robots and so forth. This will be the first kind of knowledge information evolution, or revolution, depends on how it goes. But so that's a really interesting one. So, lots of people out of mines, out of steelworks, etc. So all of that kind of working class was suddenly put out of work in Sheffield or, Newcastle or wherever. And this one is going to affect London, the core of Birmingham, the core of the cities where it's all knowledge professional workers. It's the big four accountancies, it's the lawyers. It's, you're about to put millions of lawyers out of work. So I think that's a really interesting change that's going to be quite hard for most economies to swallow.
Yeah. But like, I guess the owners of the AI, or the owners of the businesses that benefit from the AI, probably will do quite well out of it, because they'll cut their costs. They'll be able to hold on to the revenue for some period of time. There will be more competition, but they will be able to. They'll probably do quite well. Share prices will probably rise quite quickly. A lot of other people will get left behind. What does that do to taxes? Because ultimately the governments are going to have to tax, I think, people much more in order to pay for the people who are not working. Like, yeah, I don't pretend that I have any knowledge anybody else does on this subject, but I do find it fascinating, but also terrifying. What's your before we close off the podcast, before we pull this to an end, what's one SaaS subscription that you're actually going to keep and not replace?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So, and we've been going down the list of things that we're probably going to replace, like Calendly and so forth. All these types of things I think are easy replaced, but I think email is probably the one that I wouldn't touch, because I think
Why?
I think on the face of it, it looks easy. Like, I've got a Gmail client or an Outlook client. Like, it's just a client. You can build that really easy. And yes, you can. But all the stuff that goes on in the background to make sure that email does actually get delivered, the anti-spam, the blacklisting, whitelisting, and all of those things around deliverability are really quite hard. And you can't just code your way into that. There's a lot of infrastructure, knowledge, and pre-existing stuff being built there to support that. So I think email I wouldn't touch with a barge pole, probably. I think that's a difficult one.
Do we even need interfaces anymore? If agents are the ones that are using these tools, are going to be using the tools in the future, do we need to build the actual interface? Why not just build APIs essentially?
Yeah, like that feels like the logical end game of this, doesn't it? Like, we were talking about, let's build a CRM system, let's build this, but that's all kind of
They build anything.
Yeah, the current way that we're working in, like humans. Because you need to put in a lead into a database, etc. But if I wanted to order an Uber, I don't really need an Uber app for that. I just need to say to something, I need a taxi now from Birmingham, and I'm going to Sheffield. So you're right. Ultimately, interfaces are going to change. How long that takes, I don't know. And there are still certain things that where a voice or typing interface is just not the right one. So I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Yes, it is going to change. But what it ends up looking like, I don't know. I think it's going to depend on a per app basis, isn't it? But a lot's going to go voice, and a lot's probably going to go simple prompt, style.
Yeah, but I think if you're thinking of an AI is now doing a lot of the orchestration, a lot of the work that previously humans are doing, an AI doesn't want an interface necessarily. Although maybe an interface is still a good thing for an AI to be able to kind of figure out and use as well. But especially for interconnectivity of different tools, interfaces are probably a universal language that humans and computers can both use. But ultimately, yeah, are we? At what point, when we build software, do we need to build it from the ground up for two types of users, for agents and for humans? Which means you have to build, an MCP style, whether that's the future or not, MCC style connection so that agents can use it too.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, you do. And the question is, how long will the user bit survive? Like, the AI agent will be there. And you're absolutely right. Maybe if I'm ordering a taxi, I don't even need to prompt it, because it's already looked at my diary and figured out where I need to be, and it's already done that for me. So you can evolve this to an nth degree. But I suspect in the short term, it's kind of a hybrid, isn't it? Where AI is doing some of it, and the humans doing some of it as well. And I still think, take that CRM, you still want to know how many leads you've dealt with this month, because there's still a human requirement for that. So how do you just ask the AI, how many leads have we dealt with this? Oh, 53. Okay, great. But I still think humans have this innate requirement to see something on a screen or see something visually displayed. And maybe AI is just building that on the fly, and not having to have pre-built dashboards or screens or reports or whatever. So that's probably where we'll get to, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, you're right. We should be building them from the ground up with AI in built.
And it's a different skill set as well. Like I'm noticing that. As I'm ramping up a new team as well, and like I'm noticing that the thinking about building software in this new world for agents, it's like a lot of it's about almost like communication patterns in a chat interface, and which is, I guess, new to certainly designers, but new to everyone. And you're basically taking a lot of inspiration from what some of the vibe coding tools like that you've mentioned, Lovable, Replit, Bolt, Vercel, Base 44, all of those, what they've all done. But they're only like a year or two into this too. Like everyone's like no one knows exactly what it's going to look like. And no one's actually that expert in it. If you try and search for an expert, you used to be able to find an expert in things that you wanted. This is all brand new. No one's an expert, or the maximum expertise you have is a year. And the people who are experts are actually PhD candidates who've spent 5 years researching it. Is that really the skills that you need to be able to implement it now? Often not. Sometimes it is, of course, but often not. So like it's such a interesting time where we are true. It feels like for the first time in, I think, my working like life, it's like true innovation in software building is kind of required again, because like the paradigm has changed.
I think the move to mobile had similar-esque to it. It's not to the same degree, but, having to rethink everything from a mobile point of view, because we'd all been
You're
sat
now
on
on
big
the
screens,
walking.
lots of real estate, and now you're on the move, you've got GPS and you've got all these things. So I think that had a bit of that, but it's not to the same degree. And I think you're right. Like we're now looking for the developers and the designers to completely rethink the way we build these things, because everything has been built around a human. And now that's not necessarily the case. The primary user might be another AI bot that's just coming in and doing stuff inside our system. So how do we give it access? There's all sorts of other things it raises, like security, access control, and all those other things that come into that play. And I think that's a really uncharted territory as well. And probably going to cause us all sorts of dramas in the short term while we figure it out, because there's no standards for this. Like nobody's come up with this is how we do this, as you say. So yeah, crazy, brave new world.
Fun times.
Fun times.